Well, hello there, woman beings, and welcome to a season 4 episode of the Woman Being Podcast. We are so excited to be here with you today. I am your host, Kelly Ann, and we have, of course, the stupendous Emma.
Hello, hello.
And the radiant Kelly.
Hello.
And today we're going to be kicking off season 4, talking about things that used to feel like a super big deal when we were steeped in Christian culture and purity culture and church camp and all the things, of course. And we're just going to dive right in.
This is Woman Being,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds
without expectation or judgment.
We will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
All right, ladies, I am so excited to be back in the studio with both of you. Dear listener, I am excited to be back in your ear.
Oh,
what a summer
intimate.
we have had, guys.
It has been a summer.
It really has.
Summer happened.
Summer
well,
happened.
It's still happening in Reading, at least.
Yeah. But wow, what a summer we've had. We've had some time off. And yeah, we have some announcements. Kel, do you want to go ahead?
Well, first of all, our baskets.
Yes.
Look at them.
For anyone that's watching video.
Yes, we have so many more baskets now. The basket wall is growing. At some point, it will take over this entire room, maybe the entire house that we are currently in. There might be baskets.
It's kind of like a bad
everywhere.
mold.
Yeah,
like
it just
in a good
spreads
way.
on its own. We walked in to record today and we were like, wow,
there's more
baskets.
Someone just accidentally pressed purchase on a bunch of baskets and accidentally they ended up on the wall.
A minimum of a set of 8.
I don't know who would have done that. So
but yeah,
that's very exciting.
That's my only big news.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
That's pretty much it for Kelly's updates.
Except if anyone has been following me on my social media, we never really plug our personal socials, but some of you do. You would know that I'm having a baby.
Very exciting.
Which means I am with child.
Finally.
I have a bun in the oven. I am pregnant.
Some might say it's our 4th woman being.
Because we did find out it's going to be a girl.
Yes. Very exciting.
So woman being number 4.
Yeah.
On the way.
Can't wait.
Coming December.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's thrilling.
It really is.
Very thrilling.
Yeah. Speaking of thrilling.
What?
You should tell the story.
Yeah, the story
of how we found out you were with child.
Well, if for any of our dedicated listeners who remember our trip to Spain, and there was a point while we were in Spain where I fell ill.
Yes.
And continued to be ill for quite a while. In addition to the fact that I was late and some other factors.
On your period?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, just saying late didn't register in my brain.
Late. Me and Emma got on
I'm
the plane
like,
without
what do you mean?
I was late. So, no, late people, always pregnant. So, yeah, we had, let's see, should I start from the beginning? I don't know. What happened was that we found out I was pregnant while we were in Morocco.
Yeah, I mean, after there was many days of you feeling very sick, very fatigued, we were limping through Spain and Morocco with you in tow. And
in the desert,
putting you on a bus for like 12 hours with a bunch of stinky strangers to go ride camels in the Sahara Desert, which is magical, but also
we danced around the fireplace.
We danced around the fireplace in the desert.
The worst music I've ever heard.
We ate a lot of Moroccan food.
Yes.
We had no other choice because that's all they serve in Morocco, it seems, is Moroccan food.
I pretty much just ate chicken.
Yeah. And just dealt with constantly having to feed you at all times.
Yes.
Otherwise, you felt like you were literally dying.
Yeah.
And I remember the thing for me that got me was watching you eat a bowl of ice cream.
Yeah.
And it was like a regular, very normal flavor of ice cream. It was like vanilla chocolate chip or something.
Yeah.
And you sat there. There were mini chocolate chips. Not many, but mini chocolate chips.
Small.
Very tiny. And you sat there and picked each individual one out because you were like, I just cannot eat these chocolate chips. And I'm like, they're chocolate chips. Like, even if they weren't like the best chocolate in the world, like it's it's just a little chocolate chip and an ice cream, like, I would just eat it.
Yeah.
And you were like, this is just, I will throw up if I eat these. And it's
And we're like, oh
and I
my
was like,
God.
yeah, that's a pregnant woman.
That's not good. That's not good.
Yeah.
I do remember you went to the bathroom and we were all out to dinner and I told him, I was like, if she doesn't start her period in like tomorrow, I'm going to ask her if she wants a pregnancy test.
To be fair, my cycle had been irregular.
Yes.
And so it was late, but I had also been traveling a lot. I went to Iowa before we left for Spain, basically. Like I had like a day
Yeah.
in our home before we left again. So to me, I was like, I'm under a lot of stress. My cycle's already irregular. It's probably just
you're traveling.
delayed,
That's already going to mess it up. Yeah.
So I wasn't like, to me, it was just like, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be fair, Kellyanne and I were also both late on our periods.
We were.
That's true. We were all
but
late.
they started.
They did.
They
They
came
did start.
eventually while we
They
were on the
did.
trip. And then we weren't able to get a hold of a pregnancy test for you until the last day that we were in Morocco.
Oh my
because
God, it was the last day.
Ramadan.
Yes.
And so all the pharmacies were closed.
Yeah.
And so we finally got a test for you and you took it. And I remember Kellyanne and I are sitting on the couches of our Airbnb just waiting.
We were wide-eyed
while you
too.
sit there,
Just like-
while you go in the bathroom. And it felt like within seconds, you yelled out to us, I'm so pregnant.
Because it instantly turned pregnant.
Yeah.
It was like,
It turned pregnant.
you know how you're supposed to like take the test and then you have to wait 3
Yeah.
minutes or whatever the time
Yeah.
limit is and then you check it? Like I peed on it and it was immediately positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we all cried.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
it was
we
very
did.
bonding and
We
Yeah.
hugged and laughed. It was very special. And
Yeah.
I think at that point we had sort of been talking about it this whole time. And I think by the time I had like wrapped my head around this being a possibility and we finally got a pregnancy test, because I think it was like 5 days after we originally were like, we
You
need a
should take a
pregnancy.
test, yeah.
We need a test. So I think I would have been disappointed if it wasn't positive.
Yeah.
Because you kind of built it up.
Yeah, I was kind of excited. And I've always wanted to be able to surprise Ross with the news that I'm pregnant, but he's way too aware of my cycle and when it happens and things for that to be like possible.
Yeah.
So, I
you were
was
able
excited
to
about that.
surprise
So he had
him.
no idea.
Yeah.
I just lied to him. I was like, I feel great now.
Yeah.
You did
I
a good
feel
job.
awesome. I don't feel crazy or sick or fatigued at all.
Yeah.
So much better today, babe.
Yeah.
Everything's totally fine.
Yeah. So that's really exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
also have other news.
We do.
Kellyanne.
Other exciting
This
news.
is less exciting.
This is less exciting.
It's exciting in other ways.
This is not
It
an
is.
update.
yeah.
It is exciting in other ways. I was laid off from my job last week, which
Yes.
is actually wild to me.
Wah, wah.
It is. But also, I think like. I think it's so important to share things like, oh my gosh, things are amazing. Things are also crazy. And like, so yeah, I'm like in this weird space of like decompressing from my last job and also kind of like recentering and like, okay, I'm like doing this like program to become like a certified integrative trauma coach. And I'm like, what do I want to do now? Do I want to try and get another job? Do I want to try and start a business? Like, what is it? And it's that weird in between space. But it's also like kind of cool and exciting.
liberating,
Liberating, one could
some
say.
might say. And
But yeah.
scary.
It is
But-
scary. But also I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think if I fail, I'll know I'm failing before I actually hit rock bottom. So it'll be fine, I think.
Yeah.
So, and
Such a
Yeah.
hopeful
I
sentiment.
know.
Yeah, so-
And my husband's really supportive. So that's great. He's
Yeah.
not pushing me to like do anything other than he did push me to take a shower the other day. He was like, I was depressed. And he was like, I love you. I'm going to hug you and hold you. But also now I need you to go take a shower. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay,
And you know what? We need people in our lives that tell us, just take a shower.
go take a
Well,
shower.
you know what? Taking a shower, I would say, is one of the most cleansing, feel-good activities that you can, like,
Yeah.
going from not having a shower and finally getting a shower. That is a feeling like none other.
It's true. It is.
To-
You will definitely feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basic needs.
Mhm.
Emma, how's your summer been?
Mine has been way less eventful. In terms of life updates, I found out my car has an air pump in it.
That's a big get
Which
shot.
was fantastic because I had a flat tire this week. I was able to pump that sucker up. I learned how to use a drill. I drilled some holes in my ceiling and didn't put a giant hole in my ceiling, which I have done in the past with a drill.
Wow.
And I hung hanging plants there. They still have not fallen, so that's a win.
That's excellent.
Basically, I've just learned some basic skills.
Call him
This
with all of your
summer.
DIY needs.
Yes, I'm essentially a handyman now.
You're an autonomous, fully adult
Yes.
woman.
I wasn't an adult before,
Yes.
but now I am.
But
fully
today-
adult.
yes, I've
Yeah.
metamorphosized
Metamorphosized.
metamorphosized into a fully
It's like a
fledged
butterfly
adult
coming
woman.
out of a cocoon.
Yes,
Yes.
at the ripe age of 28.
It's almost 29.
Yeah.
So amidst some of these life changes and needs and output and all the things, we have decided to kind of make a few changes to the structure of this season because we needed it. Life is happening fast and furious, and we still want to be able to enjoy and give our best work to the Woman Being podcast. So with that, we are switching from a 1 episode per week schedule to a 1 episode per month schedule.
Yes.
So we will have 10 episodes this season, which I know is kind of like, oh, that's less to listen to. That's fine. Just go back and listen to the old ones, but don't tell us about it because we've gotten so much better at what we do in the last 4 years. I think we've gotten a lot better, but it's going to allow us to really put a lot of intentionality in how we craft each episode because we're doing 10. So I feel really excited and hopeful about the content we will get to put out this year. So that's just like a little announcement.
I think it's exciting because we will be able to focus in on very specific topics and things that we want to talk about. We have talked about so much on the podcast, and yet we still have more to say, which is shocking. But we have a lineup of really great guests that we are working on getting for y'all. We've already interviewed a guest and recorded an episode that was amazing. That will be coming to you next month, I think, in October. So look out for that. It'll be the third Tuesday of every month, except for this month, which is the last Tuesday because life.
Life is real.
So, yeah. But it's very exciting. We're also kind of honing in on what we talk about to an extent. We have a new tagline. If y'all have noticed, if anyone is sharp-eyed and you've looked on our Instagram or TikTok bios or our Threads bio, you would see our new tagline.
Which is a post-evangelical podcast from the feminine perspective.
There we go.
Ooh la la.
Yeah.
Before, for anyone that doesn't remember, it was the exploration of everything, the explanation of nothing,
Yes.
which we still hold as one of our core values. I guess 2 of our core values in there. We decided that based on surveys we've done, based on feedback that we've done, based on reviewing what content performs, what content seems to resonate most with people, what episodes get the most kind of interaction, that really kind of the post-evangelical perspective as it relates to purity culture and femininity and health and the way we look at the world really seems to kind of center so much of what we talk about and so much of what our audience really is processing through. And so for us, it's less of a change in what we're doing or like what we already, it's not like we're changing the podcast, but it's more so that we're refining our understanding of who we are.
So there you are. You are up to speed. We missed you. We're glad to be back in the studio. And honestly, it feels so special to be back in here with you guys.
Yeah.
So
And we've got a really good season
we
queued
do.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got some great ideas.
It'll be really good.
Yes.
Really fun. As we've kind of addressed all of those things and caught everyone up to speed, today we're going to be talking about, as I mentioned in the intro, kind of about the big things that used to feel like a massive deal when we were in Christian culture, when we were younger, when we were teenagers or adolescents. I mean, the stakes used to feel so high. So we're going to kind of unpack some of that today. And maybe that helps. You'll either empathize or resonate with what we're saying, or maybe like some of these things still feel like a big deal to you. And maybe we can help take some of that pressure off. So I think that's the hope for today. But let's talk specifically within the religious practice space. I think there used to be so much high stakes of like, oh my gosh, I have to check off all these boxes in order to fit in the like correct mold and like be successful. And I'm just curious, what were your guys' experiences with that? And like how, looking back now, what are some of the things that were like, holy shit, like that was a big deal, but it didn't need to be?
I've reflected on this quite a few times over the years, through the deconstruction process, through this podcast, on the idea of like religious practice sort of being presented as a practice versus being presented as like a lifestyle or the right way to live, which I think is very distinct and different. I think now I look at things that have proven benefits, like prayer, maybe even speaking in tongues, meditation, all of these sort of worship, all of these things that come along with religion that are religious practices, so often felt like they were do or die. So it's either you do meet with God every day in the morning for 30 minutes in your morning devotion, or you don't. And it's bad if you don't, and it's good if you do, rather than just presenting as like, these are all of sort of the methods that sort of accompany the faith that can be beneficial to one's spirituality, life, and health. And so I think that probably would be my summation of my understanding of religious practices. Is, to me, they didn't feel like something I could pick up and put down. They felt like things that I had to hold all the time. And I just constantly felt guilty for not being enough.
Yeah,
or
that's a
doing enough.
really good distinction too. Because I said religious practice, but really you're right. Like we were, or at least I was sold a lifestyle.
Yes.
Like this is what your day looks like to be successful, to be good.
As sure as you wake up and go to sleep every day, like you know, as sure as the sun rises and sets or whatever, you must do these things or your life must look this way, as opposed to like, here's a way you can engage with your faith. Here's like, you know, methods of it, in the way it's like the way I look at yoga now versus it's very different. It's sort of like a beneficial thing that I enjoy and I like doing. Do I feel pressure to do it every day? Absolutely not. Do I sometimes do it every day? Yeah. But it does not feel like a measure of my worth in terms of the how much or the I don't know, the dedication that I give to it. Whereas, I think religious practice, when I was steeped in it, felt like a must.
Yeah, that's so real. I mean, I remember like Wednesday night service for youth group would roll around and we'd break up into small groups. And like the question was like, how many times did you have quiet time with God this week?
Really?
Oh, 100%.
You'd get interrogated.
100%.
Wow.
It is like, how much did you read your Bible? Or like even, I remember, and here's the thing, if you benefit from this and love doing this, I have no shade towards that. But like when the new year rolls around and everyone gets the read a Bible in a year plan, and
I always thought those were so silly.
I felt so guilty and so much pressure. Like I have to catch up if I fell behind. And I had a learning disability. So keeping up with reading the Bible in a year for me was very hard, like very challenging. And that was a huge thing. I felt a lot of shame and a lot of pressure around, but wild times.
Yeah, no, and even like it would sort of be indirectly enforced, I would say. It wasn't like anyone was standing up on stage and saying, well, actually, people were standing up on stage and saying, you must do this every day. But the indirect ways that it would affect you would be like, let's say you're having a problem or you're like stressed about something or worried about something or whatever. You're expressing your problems. Like a very common response from friends, from leaders within the church context would be like, well, how much have you prayed about it? Or like, how much have you sat down with God and like pursued the scriptures about it? Or how much have you blah, blah, blah. And almost like it invalidates you having the problem if you haven't done the work to deal with it via these practices.
Yeah.
And so to me, I would say just like doing it all the time was the pressure as opposed to like getting to.
Yeah.
And I look back on my faith and I'm like, I wonder how much more open it would feel to like participate within the Christian faith now if it didn't feel so high stakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, I think I would use that idea of like going to God for problems as like a way to try to help people through problems when I didn't have any answers because I was a child. Right. I would just be like, well, what's God saying about it to you? Because I didn't know anything. I was like, I don't know. But then like I could see how that would add pressure to people of like, well, I guess I should be talking to God about it more.
Well, and it is too a form of spiritual bypassing too, in the sense that like, oh, even if you have prayed about it, but you still have the problem, have you prayed hard enough? Like, essentially the idea is like, if your faith is strong enough and your relationship with God is good enough, then you'll have the answer you need. And it's like, oh, like, because I did the same thing as you. Like, I'd be like, well, what does God say about it? Or like, how much have you, like, have you prayed about it?
Yeah,
like,
I did the same thing too.
You know, like, because it's like, I was a child. I didn't have the answers. Yeah. Like, I don't know how to help your problem. I'm sorry you're having issues in your relationship or whatever, like turbulent thing is happening for someone. And yeah, I felt a lot of pressure to like have an answer, but I didn't have an answer. So I was like, you should talk to God about it.
Well, and I feel like it sticks with me still too in the way that I approach anything that's good for me is like broccoli. It's very good for me, right? And or working out. Working out is maybe a better example. I know that working out is good for me, and I try and do it consistently. And I have to like almost verbally, or at least like in words in my mind, remind myself it is like physically impossible for me as a human to be 100% consistent all the time. And that life happens and things change, and sometimes I don't get 3 in every week. Sometimes I get 2 in. Sometimes I get 1 in. Sometimes I get 4 in, and so I've noticed with things that I attach obligation to, I really struggle with like sticking with if I'm not all in, and sometimes it feels like the pressure of, oh my God, my eating habits are not healthy enough just kind of overrides my ability to even try, Yeah. And so I think there's almost a little bit of brain rewiring and learning how to approach my health, whether that's physical, mental, spiritual, etc., in a way that is, fluid. Because I think, ultimately the everyday thing the same all the time is a very masculine approach to and patriarchal approach to faith. When
and
like
to life
and life, yes, like 9 to 5 every day, blah blah blah. So in reconnecting with myself and with my womanhood, I think there's a level of like letting things ebb and flow. And when I'm under a lot of stress, I can take on that shame when I'm feeling like something is not consistent enough or whatever. So anyways, it's interesting how it kind of bleeds into like the way you view life.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I've found a similar struggle in like accepting that ebb and flow, especially with coming from such a prescriptive background of like, this is what it looks like. But there were also so many things that were like more occasional that felt like monumental moments of faith. So like to me, I think of speaking in tongues if you come from a charismatic background, or baptism. And if you got baptized, when you got baptized, and how you got baptized, and did you go through confirmation, or were you yada, 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 on and on. And then also just even the pressures of how you interpreted the Bible. So what are your guys' thoughts on like some of those things that were more like not as consistent, but like still like built up to be huge things?
I feel like the interesting thing with the baptism piece is I noticed a trend. I don't know if this was a thing in y'all's church environments, but there was a trend of getting rebaptized.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I got weirdly confirmed into a Methodist church in middle school, even though I barely attended any of the confirmation classes, and we barely even went to that church ever. But for some reason, I got confirmed into that church, and I got a sprinkling done to me as like a 14-year-old, maybe, no, 13. And I literally did not even know what the purpose of that ceremony was for.
Oh,
like,
wow.
I did not go, I cannot reiterate how much. I think I went to one confirmation class total, and that was it. And they still let me get confirmed. And I didn't know why it was a deal of any sort.
You got to sprinkle as many of them as you can. You
I
know?
just knew that other kids my age were doing it too. That's all I know. I don't remember having even a conception of saving. Like, that was not even something that crossed my mind. Later on, I did get baptized as an 18-year-old in a dunk baptism because I wanted to have that, like, moment of getting to be baptized. I had already been a, like, quote-unquote born-again Christian for, like, 4 years at that point. But I wanted to do it. I did it in Nicaragua because that was a special place to me at the time. So I did it there, and I did it with my best friend. So it was like very ceremonial. But I've known so many people who have gotten rebaptized because they either got baptized when they, like, quote unquote weren't really Christian, or because, which would have been my case, is why I got baptized again. Or they, like, had fallen away from the faith and then come back. And so now they were being baptized as, like, a rededication to Jesus, which is interesting because that's not in the Bible. Like, literally none of those things are in the Bible. So did y'all see that trend of, like, being baptized multiple times? Because I feel like most people I knew got baptized more than once.
Yes. I mean, I was baptized as an adult. I mean, I was 16. But was also baptized as a baby, and then felt like, I think it changed my beliefs or something. I was like, no, baptism as a baby doesn't count.
Yeah.
You have to make that conscious decision to follow Christ.
Yeah.
So now I'm making that decision.
Yeah.
But I mean, regardless of, like, what the rules were or weren't, the point is that there were rules. And everyone had an opinion about whether or not you should or shouldn't rebaptize, get baptized in the first place, get baptized a third time, rededicate via baptism. Like, there was hundreds and hundreds of schools of thought on, like, what was right or wrong and whether you should or shouldn't. And I think that, to me, is what like, especially in the context of what we're talking about, like, that rings the most interesting is, like, this rigidity with which we, like, approach certain practices, like you mentioned, the inerrancy of Scripture. The idea that you could read the Bible and not interpret it within a specific set of rules, for me, is just very new and out of my box. And it is an expansion of understanding faith that I feel like has been very valuable. And I don't think I would have arrived here without exterior influences like this podcast and all of the people that we've met. But yeah, I don't know, like, yes, I was rebaptized technically, but within my faith practice, I had never actually been baptized at all. So therefore, it was my first baptism.
That's
Wow.
interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting. So the first one is just considered that essentially did not happen.
It was just a ceremonial practice that didn't mean anything.
wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of similar to, like, because I was raised United Methodist, and so as a baby, you're dedicated, quote unquote, and then you go through the confirmation class, and then you're baptized, and I was baptized and did all those
Sprinkled?
things. No, I was dunked.
I was I thought the Methodists were sprinklers.
Well, we offered
Depends.
We offered 3 forms of baptisms. We did sprinklings, which was very common with dedications. We did submersion, which we have the giant tank above the altar.
You did?
Yeah, we have the giant tank
Whoa.
above the choir loft. And so it's literally like you are up, like, behind the
like,
screen. It's crazy shit. So there's that. And then we also did pouring, which was a really beautiful. I actually thought that the pouring was really beautiful. You, like, pour water over like someone kneeling into like a bowl. It's kind of cool.
And you did all three of those were like valid?
All three were options.
That I have never heard of a church doing more than one kind.
Yeah.
I've always thought, because it's always been painted to me as so many denominational splits, even within the Protestant faith, have been because of method of baptism.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the idea that a church would be like, oh, we're chill with all three of these is just absolutely wild to me.
But also, I got baptized in a lake.
I also was in a lake.
We didn't have a church building. We were in high school.
Gotcha.
In the auditorium. And so we went to Fish Lake. And I got baptized there.
Yeah.
But it was like, the submersion was heavily emphasized as this idea of like a ceremonial death and
then raising
to life, sort of.
And that's the weird thing, because we had that same thing. And like, it was like, everyone clearly thought submersion was like the superior form. No one said it, but like, it was like, well, what kind of baptism are you going to get
No, that's definitely superior.
And so anyway, it was kind of like weird, but I remember one of my sisters expressly did not want to go through confirmation. And my parents were like baffled as to why she might not want to be confirmed into our church. And so like there is definitely that like pressure and like that huge like monumental decision of like, no, actually I don't want to participate in that way.
Well, and see, our church didn't believe in confirmation.
Interesting.
Yeah, my church was anti-membership
Yes.
in general. So it was
like,
just
it's a
you're
personal
just
relationship
part of the
that cannot be defined.
You come to the
by a
church, you're part of the
class.
church.
Yeah.
I think ours was, well, because like mine was a part of the United Methodist Convention. So I think that was like a very like numbers driven thing that they like kind of required.
for funding.
Yeah.
And for the brief period that I was in a Methodist church, there was confirmation. And most of the people my age were getting confirmed and doing the classes. And my parents were expressly like, you don't need confirmation in order to have faith. Like, no. Like, so they just like didn't force us to do it or require us to do it. And also actively were sort of against it as a practice. Because they were like, a class doesn't make you a Christian.
Yeah. No, it's 100% true.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that's like the right perspective.
Yeah.
Like a class doesn't necessarily mean you are any faith tradition.
Totally.
So.
But yeah, I mean, that's just what's, I think the infighting
Yeah.
about that is like so prominent among churches.
Yeah.
Is like the right or wrong way. Or, I don't know. And to me, it's like, it's so bizarre that because there's so much diversity in how people choose to express their faith, that it wouldn't be taught with more open-handedness. I think that, like, looking back, the idea that pastors, like, with a seminary bachelor's degree, barely, would stand up on stage with a congregation of 100 or 1,000 people, or I don't know, if anyone's from the South, like 20,000 people, and say, this is the correct form of faith. And, like, you're probably still fine if you don't agree, but it still felt very serious.
Yeah.
They were like, here are all the bad things that could happen, or the things you could miss out on if you don't do it the right way.
Yeah. No, it's so real. And, like, saying that makes me think of something like speaking in tongues. Because that is something the United Methodist Church does not necessarily align with. But, like, we had a pastor at one point that was very influential within, like, the kind of evangelical spaces of Oklahoma. But that was something, like, they sent us to an evangelical church camp, like, when we were in middle school and high school once upon a time. Not when I was older, but it was called Camp Dry Gulch. And there was a night where it's like, if you want to receive the Holy Spirit and speak in tongues. Granted, I was like 7 or 8. So I was a literal child, but they allowed children to come to a separate room. Anyone that did not want to go could leave and go back to their cabin or whatever.
Anyone that wasn't really faith-filled,
yeah,
didn't have to participate for sure.
Basically. And so I was like, I want to see what this is about. And I was like, what the hell? And like, I remember there was there was a lot of discussion and concern around the children, like being taught this doctrine and yada, yada, yada. And it became a huge thing.
When you say evangelical, do you mean like charismatic specifically?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Because Methodist is evangelical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
and Baptists and like I
Lutheran,
mean,
etc.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify.
I confused my terms.
Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah. But that's an interesting thing because I'll point back to, I've heard, and maybe this is just because I come from a Christian context and so Christians are trying to sell me on speaking in tongues, but I've heard there are like mental health benefits to speaking in tongues. That it like puts your brain in a certain type of state that, boosts your mood and helps your immune system. And I don't know, like there's studies around these types of practices and how they benefit people. But I also wonder, like, what about, like, are there studies that measure sort of the maybe negative effects of how much pressure is put on people to sort of like be able to speak in tongues or not?
Right. Well, and it also makes me wonder, like, is it the aspect of speaking in tongues? Is it the fact that you are getting into a meditative state? Or is it even something that I'm learning about right now is the resonance of your voice? Like that can be very healing and helping you process trauma and all these things. And so I'm like, is it speaking in tongues or is it potentially these other things that could be happening in addition to?
Well, and I would say probably the same about prayer and the same about meditation and the same about, all these things as it's sort of like a grounding practice or, there's some like scientific quote unquote like aspect to why religious practices benefit you and your mental health that may not be using those words.
Right.
But yeah, I think like that's what's hard to maybe wrap my head around a little bit is like there are studies that show benefits to spirituality, right?
For sure.
That show like happiness associated with being involved in spirituality. There's a community aspect. There's like all these things, which is hard to like chew on being in the deconstruction space where there's also so much harm caused. And like, how do you frame spirituality in a way that people can come and receive and benefit from, but like it's not cult-like and that you're not indoctrinating people and that it is not so rigid. And I guess coercive in its approach to how people like are able to receive the benefits of faith.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd love to know. There's like so much gray, but obviously, like you said, there's so many proven scientific benefits. But some things that we do not have scientific benefits necessarily are this restrictive, controlling nature, specifically around young women and their bodies and what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is not acceptable.
Totally.
I mean, the list goes on.
It does.
But like within like the restriction space, like that felt so high stakes, like so like,
oh my God,
important. I'm like, I think, are we all traumatized? I feel like we could all be traumatized.
Oh my gosh, like how are you not traumatized by the idea that if you bend over and your shirt falls such a way that a certain man or boy could see your boobs and thus be caused to fall into sin and that it's your fault? How could that not be traumatizing in some way?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember hyper analyzing everything I wore every Sunday.
Still do.
I remember like from the tank top to the leggings. If you are wearing leggings, to show your butt or not show your butt. We all know the correct answer was to not show your butt. Like on and on. Or like, do your heels make you look slutty or is it like a classy touch? Like, whoa.
Well, and then the biggest mindfuck, and at the end of the day, what you are wearing, is it because you want attention?
Oh my God.
Like what's your real motive?
Yeah. The assumption was if a woman is dolling herself up, is dressing a certain way, it is to receive male attention, which is such a male-centric
and
idea
if you have any
in the first
doubts,
place.
Right? Like if you have any doubts about like, should I wear this shirt or shouldn't? Think inwardly deeper. What is your true motive? What are you trying to get? You know? And so, the ultimate like mindfuck of being like, oh my gosh, I guess I probably wish I was wearing this swimsuit so that I could like fit in and be popular. And that's not something God wants. He doesn't care about those things. he wasn't cool.
Oh my
Think of
gosh.
John the Baptist. He was a weirdo. So I guess like ultimately it's just vanity. Therefore I shouldn't.
And vanity is a sin.
And vanity is bad.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's a hard one
Yeah.
to unravel.
yeah.
But like if a guy spends hours and hours in the gym working out to build up his muscles so that he looks a
that's
certain
just
way.
Well, that's treating his body like a temple.
Temple. Yeah. Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there was just some guy at church one day who just said offhandedly that he thinks that girls should never wear makeup. Like if they're truly secure in who they are, if they're truly trying to honor God and the beauty God gave them, they should just not wear makeup because why would you cover up the face God gave you? And I felt so deeply guilty just hearing that I stopped wearing makeup for 2 years.
Whoa. Yeah.
Just full stop. I was like, I guess I just won't wear makeup anymore
Damn.
because I need to look godly.
Well, and the funny part, I've never wore with makeup. The only reason I wear makeup is because the patriarchy in the corporate world.
Yeah.
But like
Fair.
my happiest days are days that I don't feel pressure to have to wear any makeup. I had internalized this idea that because I didn't wear makeup, I was spiritually superior to any other insecure woman out there that felt like she couldn't,
Yeah.
or she had to wear makeup or
Yeah. It's so
was wearing
silly
makeup.
because I always just thought makeup was fun growing up. Like I remember in elementary school, I got this makeup kit that was like glittery kid makeup. And I brought it to the playground. I like snuck it into school, brought it to the playground, and my friends and I like globbed glitter on our faces. And it was just fun. It was like, I like getting to like do this. And like, as you got older, there was a sense of insecurity. I think that came along with it of like, oh, I need to cover up pimples or things like that as you're hitting puberty, as you're going through all of these hormonal changes. Yeah, I wanted to cover up my pimples. I didn't like the way they looked. But I think that it's like heartbreaking to me to like see that like break away. I do think, maybe this is a bit of a devil's advocate moment, I think there was a sense in which it made me feel like I don't have to have it. And I think that even though I felt I did it out of like a guilt moment, I do think there was a sense of like, I realized like, oh, I don't need makeup. And at a time when I was like, I was 16, I think maybe, at a time when there's a ton of pressure to wear makeup at the same time.
So you're saying that's like the silver lining that came out of it, maybe?
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of a silver lining in that sense. But then when I went into college, I played with makeup a ton, and I had so much fun with it, with eyeshadow and lipstick and things that I didn't even get to experience because I, in high school, had just like cut makeup out. It was like, this is not an option.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I do think it helped me feel less dependent on it, if you're going to give the silver lining of it. But I don't love that it came out of this like guilt or this idea that like to be a more holy person that I need to not wear makeup, like to be a more righteous woman, I don't wear makeup.
Yeah.
But all of it did feel so monumental in terms of like, are you good or not? Do you love God or not? Like, have you fully accepted his plan for you in your life or not?
Yeah.
Like whether or not you can resist the PG-13 rated movie that your friends want to watch or not. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Like how well can you resist the world? And here's the thing, I'm very good at resisting. Looking back, I'm like, I was just like, great, you don't want me to do that? I won't. But it was but at the cost of becoming hyper obsessed with every decision that I made and whether or not it was right or wrong.
Yeah. That's crazy that you brought up the movies, though, because I remember movies were a huge thing. And then also what kind of music you listened to was huge. And I liked Disney radio. So I would listen to Disney radio in my room by myself, and I felt bad about it. I remember feeling guilty, like, oh my gosh, they're not singing. Basically, like, in my brain, they were not singing about God. Therefore, the message of something outside of God was getting into my mind and into my heart.
Damn. See, Disney music for me, I think, was...
It was safer.
It was, it was like, I am resisting the pop culture nonsense out there and, you know, choosing a more wholesome... I mean, I was basically infantilizing myself and saying like, oh, I won't deal with any of these adult themes because they're, you know, bad.
Yeah, totally.
And I will stay innocent and pure and young.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember throughout elementary and middle school, I was a big fan of the Beatles. And I had collected Beatles records and CDs and paraphernalia. And when I became a Christian in high school, I was like, the Beatles aren't worshiping God. So I sold all of my Beatles stuff.
I hate this story. It's so tragic.
So
I sold it all. Like I had a collection of things and I sold all of it and only listened to Christian music for about, I think I stuck with that for like 2 years. And then when I was around 16, I watched a video from, do you know who Jefferson Bethke is?
Yes.
He was like an early Christian influencer.
I do know
He did
who
the
is.
Jesus is Greater Than Religion video that was like viral in the Christian realm. He did a video about how like you can worship God through secular music and how like the example he used was Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror and how that song is talking about improving yourself. You're looking at the man in the mirror and you want to change your ways. You want to be better, be a better person. He's like, how is God not in that? And I was like, oh, all right, I'll listen to secular music. And then I just started listening to it again.
Yeah.
And it was very like, it was just like a switch back to me. But there was a period where I thought like, oh, I have to. And it wasn't even like I had friends who didn't do that. And I didn't care that they didn't. Like it wasn't a big deal, but it was like, in my mind, I was like, I want to do every possible thing that I could do to like be as dedicated to God as possible. So I'm going to do this. But I didn't tell other people they should. So it was, I don't know how I added that up in my head, but I do regret that I got rid of all of that Beatles stuff. But
yeah, people will reference like our childhood who grew up in normal, like and watch things like SpongeBob or whatever. And I'll be like, anything pop culture like until like 2015 is just a black hole for me. I may have picked up a thing here or there, you know, like there are certain songs that were obviously big enough that I couldn't not know them.
Yeah.
But like, I don't have that. I don't have that like childhood nostalgia about anything aside from like especially when Christian music started becoming cool. And there was like rock music and like pop music and rap music and all these things that were Christian. That was like my safe space in terms of like pop culture. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. Do you guys remember like the sermon, the idol sermon that was like, have no idol before me. And then like your pastor would talk about like, these are the types of idols that you could have. Like you could worship another god. You could worship money. But also an idol could be Hillary Duff. Are you obsessed with Hillary Duff? Maybe she's an idol in your life, you know? Or do you love anything more than God? Do you love anything at all? That might be an idol in your life.
Yeah.
Did you guys get that sermon? I got that sermon a lot of times.
100%. 100%. It was the worst, too, because I'd be like, I have to go home and make a list of all of the things and actively try and remove that from my life.
Because first of all, it's not like it happened one time. Like, I don't know how many times I've gotten that sermon, but I have received that sermon a lot of times. But yes, it was always like, I mean, I gave up playing guitar and singing because in worship. Like I was leading worship music and I gave it up in college because I felt like I was making it too much about me.
Because you were good?
I don't know.
Because you liked it too much.
Yeah, I just like I wanted to be good at it too much.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm sorry. I hate that.
You know what I mean?
But yeah, I did like similar things. 100%. Like part of me when I quit dancing, because that was like essentially like the direction in life I wanted to go. When I quote unquote gave that up, half of it was like, I'm tired of my life being a rehearsal. Like I want to just go live like and like do things because I want to and not say no because I have to go to rehearsal or whatever. But the other half was also like, I'm quitting because I'm pursuing ministry school. And that is a way of choosing God over these other things. And that just like, that kind of is wild to me. Because that was as recent as a decision I made when I was 17.
Yeah. I mean, I gave up. I mean, I believed that if you were addicted to coffee, like you had an idol in your life.
Yeah.
And everyone is addicted to coffee.
Yeah.
In the whole world.
In the whole wide world, including me.
You know what I mean? Like, I thought like anything that you were dependent on or anything that you... Like, I remember a friend of mine gave up The Lord of the Rings for Lent because she loved it too much.
Oh my gosh.
She watched it too much. And I'm like, I gave up High School Musical one year. Yeah. And it's just like, maybe those were just like forms of escapism like anything else that we're just trying to disconnect from the trauma that we were living. I don't know, but but this idea that like, oh, you love that more than God, like get rid of it.
Yeah. That makes it like immediately bad. Something else that comes to mind around restrictions is dress codes at summer camp. Oh my gosh. One time I went to a summer camp that required the girls to swim in t-shirts. It did not matter if you had a one-piece or a two-piece, you best have a t-shirt over that swimsuit. And I'm like...
Yeah, and the little boys had to wear swimsuits or t-shirts too, yeah?
No, absolutely not.
Oh, interesting.
It's ridiculous.
That doesn't count, guys.
Yeah, women just are not visual. And so they won't lust after the boys if they see them. And you know what? None of the boys are gay. So they also will not lust after any of those other boys.
Yes.
And so you don't have to worry about them.
Girls aren't gay either, so you don't have to worry about them in locker rooms. Or
absolutely.
Yes. And girls are scary. So we need to cover them all the way up.
No, girls are a threat.
Yes.
Girls are what cause adult men to sexually assault the girls.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Actually.
Yes.
You never know what your youth pastor's going to do, but you better believe if your 12-year-old's walking around with the low-cut shirt, your youth pastor might become a different person.
Oh, which is horrifying to me that was like imposed on the girls, like the young children, and like things like make sure when you have a meeting, make sure you leave the door open. It's like, what? Because you're gonna do actually what? Like, I think no one can answer that question still. Yeah. Like, as recently as my ministry school days, they were like, oh, we leave the door open. I'm like, why? What's going to happen? They're like, oh, sometimes things just happen. And now I'm like, no. Things don't just happen. Actually. Like, are you planning on assaulting me?
Yeah.
If that's the case, I don't want to meet with you, period. Right. In fact, I don't want to associate with you.
Well, even more so, do you have a culture of allowing and covering up abuse?
There you go.
Because that's something to be concerned about.
There you go.
I'd keep the door open then. If that's something I should be concerned about.
Yeah, if this is something you don't take seriously and allow to happen within your walls and then you just cover it up and pay people off, that seems concerning.
Yeah.
I don't think it has anything to do with the door being closed.
Nope. Definitely not.
Yeah. There was an Instagram post about how if a man knows how to like not touch another man's back as he goes across a room, how to not randomly kiss another man, how to not grope another man, how to not do all these things, and they also know how to not do that to women. And so just don't do it.
Yeah.
Just remember that as a human being and don't do it to them.
Yeah.
Full stop. You know how.
And like the allure of a woman's body was presented as so powerful and potent to me that like I would cry for hours about things like this.
Yeah.
I remember one time when Ross and I were just dating, and at this time we were both like little babes. And I think I was like wearing a dress, very modest dress. I mean, everything I wore was modest. And I think I was like leaning over in a certain way, and he was like, oh, I can see your boobs. Can you sit up? And I was like shocked and like horribly, horribly ashamed and cried about like possibly causing this person that I loved and cared about so much to sit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Yeah.
what?
It's so sad.
Like that felt like the word, like I was like, oh my God, I have done the worst thing I could possibly do
Yeah.
to a person that I care about deeply.
Yeah.
And
the
he was
amount
like,
of
whoa.
shame.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the amount of shame that would just wash over me and, like, sit in my stomach.
Yeah.
And I still feel that sometimes to this day. And, like, I remember, like, being publicly reprimanded at times for, like, either things I would wear or, like, you shouldn't hug boys, like, whatever. I'm like, that's my friend. Like, I have no emotional, like, feelings towards this person other than friendship. And same for me, like, and, like, the shame that would just wash over you. I remember that feeling like it's yesterday.
Yeah. I remember when I read good old I Kiss Dating Goodbye, our
boo,
favorite book.
Joshua Harris.
Our favorite book on the podcast. I read about how if you hugged a man, they feel your chest on their chest. And I was like, that's it. No more hugging boys. Full stop.
Yeah.
And I stopped. I didn't hug any of my guy friends, anyone at church. Like, the only man that I hugged was my father. Like, that was it. And I refused. And so that went on for years.
Yeah.
Out of this, just I was like fearful that I would. I thought of it more as like, I'm getting violated because they're thinking about me in that way. So, like, I'm getting violated because I'm hugging them and then they're thinking about my chest.
Interesting.
And so that was, like, scary to me.
Yeah.
Until I finally allowed one close guy friend to hug me. And then I allowed the boy I dated to hug me. And that was it.
Wow.
That's wild to me because I didn't think of it as, like, I was being violated. I thought about it as I was violating them because I was just, like, putting my tit on them. I'm like, that is not what's happening.
Yeah.
Well, I felt both ways. And like, as we've been talking about this, it reminds me of like how much ownership I felt over the thoughts of other people. Right. And like how much responsibility I felt for the thoughts of other people and still feel, I think I like it's taken a lot of unraveling to like unlearn that. And I'm still very much working on that. But this idea that like worst case scenario, masturbate to me.
Yeah.
Right. And that would be like the ultimate stumbling. And like now I look back and I'm like, so? Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, it's kind of like creepy and gross maybe just to like know that. But also at the end of the day, like,
yeah.
Kind of a compliment.
Mostly, I'm just like, don't tell me about it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, if someone did, like, there's nothing I can do about that.
It doesn't even affect you.
I'm not an active participant in that.
No.
That's like someone else's deal. And so the idea that I felt so much responsibility to prevent that at all costs, I don't know, like, yeah, that would be definitely really weird to hear or learn about.
Sure.
But like the scenario of someone even telling you that they masturbated to you is already weird and problematic.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, so what if you see my boob and you like go home thinking about it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, it's wild to me that, like, I don't think my mind ever even went that far in terms of, like, I never thought, like, oh, what if someone jacks off about me? Like, that was just never a thought. I don't think I even processed the idea that someone in my church might be masturbating. Even though I was. Like, I'm like, I don't know why I didn't think other people
You're
were.
like, it was only you. You're
You're the only one.
And so I don't know why that was like, it just didn't even cross my mind that that was happening or that that was an option or that they would want to. I don't know. Maybe that was a self-esteem thing.
I just felt like a target all the time. I felt like I was just an irresistible slice of meat that would walk into a room and guys could not resist my scent.
Yeah,
like
I would just salivate.
That was how like modesty was framed to me. And then it probably didn't help that on top of that I was, tall and beautiful and thin and, had all these other things that made me believe like, oh no, I am pretty. So therefore like I am extra super threat. And it was just more crippling because I felt like especially in my clothing, I had to actively make myself ugly to not feel like a possible threat.
Absolutely.
And so I made myself feel bad about how I looked with what I wore to prevent myself from feeling good looking.
Absolutely. Similarly to you, I had a fat, juicy ass. Still do. And
She juicy.
I have the same, thing similarly. And I think in correlation with that was the pressure to not be beautiful. Like, there was such a, deep, subliminal messaging of, don't be too pretty. You should be pretty. So if you're ugly, you should probably wear makeup. Similar, differently from what Emma said earlier of you're beautiful the way God made you, so you should not wear makeup. But it's if you're beautiful, you shouldn't wear makeup.
But yeah,
but if you're not beautiful,
you need to make an effort, but don't make
makeup.
too much of an effort.
Exactly.
Because you have to be pretty so that somebody will want to marry you, but not too pretty that all the men will lust after you.
But also don't trick them. So on your wedding night, when you take off the makeup, they've been duped.
Yeah, you can't dupe
Was this something
anybody.
they talked about in your church?
This is all the implicit message. There actually is a book. This woman interviews all these men about things that they would like in a woman.
Yeah.
And she spends an entire chapter about how men want women to make an effort into their appearance. Mm-hmm. And so don't be too fat. Mm-hmm. Or if you are a little fat, make sure you're dressing yourself up nice. Mm-hmm. And but then also that's coupled with this purity culture messaging of don't be irresistible.
Yeah, definitely.
And so,
we
were... I literally remember internalizing in this book, oh my gosh, I do need to make an effort on how I look because that's what my husband will want.
But make the right effort.
Right.
If you make the wrong effort, then you're trying too hard to get the attention. Yeah. And then that's not virtuous.
If you don't make an effort, then you're embarrassing him for being his wife. But you're not desirable enough to him. But if you do make an effort, you can't make too much of an effort or, I don't know what will happen. Someone will masturbate to you. I don't know. You're going to get trafficked. I don't know. You're going to get got.
Yeah.
That's, to me, I look back and I'm why was that such a big deal?
Yeah. It was
so
huge.
what? And now even I can say that to you and be so what? Who cares? But still, especially in work settings or more professional settings, I still feel so much, or even just going back to the Midwest when I visit family, I just feel so much pressure to not present myself in a slutty way. California is very forgiving in what you can wear, for sure, in comparison to the Midwest.
That's true.
So
that is so true. It is so wild. The utter mind fuck that was the purity culture landscape for a young female.
Yeah. I mean, we could just do a whole episode on that, and we have
multiples.
But point being, I think all of it. I think even just your sexuality in general felt so. I would probably say at least 50% of what made you a good Christian. Mm-hmm. What you wore, what your purity was, all of that was so monumental in a young adolescent's development in the church.
Yeah.
And now it's looking back, it's whoa.
Yeah.
I had other things going on in my life and my sex drive was the last on the list.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, let's talk about purity culture because there was just monumental moment after monumental moment and shame layered upon shame. Everything was high stakes when it came to purity culture.
I would say the easiest one is your virginity.
Yep.
Are you a virgin? Could almost be synonymous with, do you love God?
Are you a good person?
See, I would say in our church environment, it was, are you a virgin or have you lost your virginity and are repentant of it? That was the two things that made you holy, that made you a good Christian. Either you're a virgin or you feel bad for not being a virgin.
Well, as long as you lost your virginity before you were following Christ.
Oh, no. Even people, we had one of our leaders in our group who he was 18, lost his virginity. And he told us, all the leaders, that he lost his virginity and repented. And we were all right, bro.
Well, there's a period, though, of shame that you have to go through, I think.
Right.
If you lose your virginity within the church context.
Yeah. Sure. You should be I don't know what his personal
right.
His
you lose
personal
your virginity,
was.
And then you have to go through this period of guilt and shame, and then you can truly move on, whatever. And, they might forgive you in the moment, but, you're still on a blacklist for a little while.
Yeah.
He still led at church, did
Wow.
everything that he already did.
That's so. There was
Again, my church was a pretty unique scenario compared to a lot of others, so it's not that relevant.
my youth pastor's daughter lost her virginity, and oh my God,
Youth pastor's daughter.
she had to come up she had to like go preach about it and like talk about how she lost her virginity. But honestly, I remember listening to her tell her story, and the thing that was craziest to me was people's reactions to her losing her virginity. Because she had been like, I mean, her mom / my youth pastor was an abstinence educator, and she would go around to schools and like tell kids not to have sex, otherwise they'd get STDs. And
no other option.
so she had all these boyfriends in her past and all these like relationships and guys that had been friends with her and whatever, who upon finding out that she had lost her virginity were then offended that she had denied them the opportunity to
Take her virginity?
and she gave it to this other guy. And so she was like,
So she had multiple boyfriends who reacted like this?
I mean, she dated all over.
Right.
She and her sister were both allowed to date very openly.
Yeah.
Which was very not what I was allowed to do, but they were allowed to date, but they weren't allowed to have sex.
Yeah.
And so they had like made out with guys and kissed people and whatever, but they were saving themselves for marriage. And so she had all that additional pressure being the pastor's daughter.
Yeah.
And yeah, like she talked about having guys text her the next morning because the news traveled really fast for her too. And she had guys like that she thought were friends texting her the next day and being like, why didn't you give it to me? Or like, why, like.
They were upset that she didn't have sex with them, but she had sex with this
They were
other
like,
guy.
I thought you weren't having sex and that was the only reason you weren't going to have sex with me.
Wow. So they aren't even mad that she's like not pure anymore. They're mad they didn't get some.
They didn't get the opportunity.
Yes. They were like, I thought you were just like anti-sex.
So they're like, why did this guy get the trophy, essentially?
Yes.
Also the audacity.
I know.
To ask that.
I know. So anyways, and the fact that she even had to go up in front of the church and say, I lost my virginity. Here's my story.
Yeah.
To me, that's traumatizing like in and of itself.
Yeah.
Please forgive me. But then on top of that, she has all these a-holes, like level 1 a-holes who are reaching out to her and like upset that she's had sex now and they weren't on the list.
That's crazy. Oh, that like reminds me of like at church camp, we would have like special days where like you could elect a class to go to. And I decided to go to a class on purity in, I think it was middle school, honestly. And I remember this woman got up and shared a story, and she was married by that point, but she's like, I'm going to tell you why you basically shouldn't have sex. Because I had sex with someone else when I was younger, and then they're not my husband. I didn't get married to them. And I remember crying.
Wow.
I remember feeling so much pain for her as she told this story. And like you said, like this is so like traumatizing to just like cultivate this environment where it's like, oh, all this horrible stuff because I had sex with someone else before I knew my husband. And then me like having that emotional reaction to her sharing her story that's very intimate and vulnerable. And like the fact that like people, like women and people in the church are expected to share those kinds of stories. It's like your sexuality belongs to the community and not to you. That's crazy.
Yeah. I remember my first like serious boyfriend, he had a bit more experience than I. And I remember being terrified to ask him if he was a virgin or not. Because I was like so scared that maybe he had already crossed that line, Like it felt very scary to me. Like the idea that like but I also wasn't of the mindset of like, I would have broken up with him, but it was like, oh, that would hurt,
Like
and
he
so
didn't wait for me.
Yeah. And just the idea that like in my mind, it was like a sign of like, your faithfulness and your resolve. And it's like, oh, he's like showing himself to be less faithful. Cause he would talk about at times like girls that he had dated in the past and kind of hinted towards things. And so asking him that was like a very scary thing.
Yeah.
And thank God he was a virgin, according to what he said. So,
Oh my God.
What would you
but
have
probably
done?
just barely.
The culture in our youth group was, because of my pastor, was such that like you just regularly, blatantly would ask people if they were virgins.
What?
Yeah. Like
You just go up to people.
I think
Hi,
that,
my name's Kelly. Are
I
you
feel
a
like
virgin? I am.
that would be like one of her first questions to random dudes that joined the youth group.
What?
She'd be like, "Are you a virgin?" And they'd say yes or no. And she'd be like, "Great, well, you're going to be a secondary one if you're not. Like, this is the way things
A
are."
secondary one?
A secondary virgin.
What is? I don't know.
it
What
means
that
you-
means.
God will restore your virginity.
Yes, yeah. It means you
Oh.
are not a virgin, but that you have recommitted to abstinence.
Whoa.
Wow.
And she would talk about how she would ask, like, anytime her daughter's got a boyfriend, she'd be like, "Are they a virgin?"
Wow.
It was like just like a.
It's such a weird
it's like your,
thing.
It's
to
like
get,
saying your name, your pronouns, and your virginity status.
Right.
Like,
yeah, it's such a weird thing to get so hung up on.
no, it was huge. Like it was like I would be like, I would never date that person. They're not a virgin.
See, my assumption was always if anyone is a Christian, they're a virgin. Like I just assumed. I was like, oh, you must be. I didn't ask people. I didn't go around talking about it. I was just like, oh, they're probably a virgin.
We were like probably the most sex positive youth group you could be in the context of purity culture. Because like we talked very openly about it, but it was also still very taboo. But like it was an open conversation, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
But it was like, sex is good.
Yeah.
You're going to have a rockin' time with your husband. Boom, boom, boom. Here's all the details.
Yeah.
But are you a virgin or not?
Oh, wow. That is wild. I do remember kissing even was a big deal though. Like because
Kissing.
we all read I Kiss Dating Goodbye, like it was taught at my church. I remember I was saving my first kiss for marriage.
Because if you date someone or have a physical relationship with them and end up not marrying them, you're always going to wonder what would happen if I had married that person instead. And that was...
You know, as someone that has kissed other people, I don't think that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I would have a very sad, boring life if I were married to that
also,
person.
like, even if you did think that, who cares? Like, that's so human nature to be like,
Yeah.
well,
What if this had
what would
happened?
have happened
Yeah.
if I had never married Ross? Like, what would have happened if...
Yeah.
If I never took that job,
Yeah.
if I never moved to this place. If I,
Yeah.
Like, that's just...
Yeah.
It's like normal to think about.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a sign of a bad thing unless you're in a toxic relationship that you are wishing that you weren't in. So it's not like you're going to long for something that you never got. I remember asking my spiritual mom before I started dating my only other boyfriend besides Ross, like, is it okay if I date him? Like, what do you think? And she was kind of like, well, I mean, like, I dated some people before I married Lonnie, but like, and sometimes, you know, because of finances, I think like, how would my life be different or whatever? But honestly, like, it's not like a big deal.
Yeah.
She's like, you'll remember them, but it's not like they're gonna stick in your soul for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that same first serious boyfriend. He was the second boy I ever dated. The first boy I ever dated, I didn't even kiss because I was saving it for marriage. The second boy I dated for a full 13 months before we kissed. And it was only through immense pressure that I finally kissed him. Like, it was through him asking so many times. It was through him talking to our church worship leader and being like, do you think it'd be okay for us to kiss? And him saying yes. And then him coming to me knowing I very much respected that worship leader and saying, he said it's okay if we kiss, so I think it's okay if we kiss. And I finally allowed kissing to happen. But it took a lot of wearing down because I had that so steeped in my mind of like, this kiss is very important and special and it cannot be given away willy-nilly.
Yeah.
It cannot just go because there was just a momentous amount of pressure on those very innocent things that like people do when they're like freaking 12,
Yeah.
you know? And to me, it was like, no.
Yeah. I mean, and the premise is so flawed. This idea that you could give something away and no longer have it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, actually, you still have your lips and
Yeah.
you still have your sexuality and
Yeah.
like it's still yours. Like,
Yeah.
you get to choose how to express it
Mhm.
in whatever way you want. And that doesn't mean you won't have regrets.
Sure.
You know, that doesn't mean you might not like make out with the dude who turned out to be like an idiot
Yeah.
or whatever.
Which this guy was. He
Yeah.
sucked.
And you spent 13 months thinking about that. You know?
Yes.
Like you still, you know, but it's
Yeah.
not like you haven't lost anything actually.
Yeah.
You just gained an experience.
Yes. Better way of thinking about it, I think.
I don't know.
For
Like,
sure.
did you
Yeah.
lose something when you went on your first hike?
Yeah.
And that
You
was,
lost, I guess, the experience of the first time hiking. But that doesn't mean that you won't like hiking anymore.
Yeah.
Or that hiking is now defiled
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous
It's like
way
you
of
chose
thinking
the
about
wrong
it.
hike.
That's like
Yeah.
saying, oh, the first time you eat a grilled cheese sandwich,
Yeah. You have to
you've
be very
lost
careful.
that forever.
Yeah, no.
It's so silly and trivial.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It does not take away from your life.
No.
It only adds. I
You
like
just-
that idea.
you
It
just
adds to the
lived.
experiences you've had. It
You
adds
lived.
to who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't do things because you feel pressured to do it, because you, either way,
Yeah.
either direction.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do it because you want to
Yeah.
and let it enrich your life.
Yes.
You can learn from it. You can grow from it.
like you have not
Amen.
sullied anything.
No.
That's a real word.
You are not like a white t-shirt to be tarnished.
Yes. Oh, which that's an analogy that I think I heard too many times. Like you become a white t-shirt and you every
You become
time
one? Are
you're
you not-
like
you are one.
if you think of a virgin like a white
Yeah,
t-shirt and
yeah.
every time you do something with someone else it's like they're putting you on and taking you off.
Mhm.
I'm like, ugh. Like, no. How dare
Icky.
you? Yeah.
Objectification.
Da-na-na-na-na.
Wow. But yeah, point being, all of these things felt like determiners of my future, of the success of my future marriage, of the success of my faith, of measures of my devotion to God, of measures
Yeah.
of how much I truly believed.
Totally. I
Like-
mean, all those things are what prevented me from dating my now husband
Yeah.
for almost a year.
Yeah.
I was like, no, we're friends, no, we're friends, no, we're friends, no, we're friends. And then finally my spiritual mom broke me down and was like, babe, what's the big deal? Toby, shout out to you.
There you go.
And I was like, well, the kind of men that I date are the kind of man I'm going to marry, and I don't want to marry him. And she was like, just go for ice cream. That's literally it. Like, you don't have to marry him. And I was
Yeah.
like, that was like so mind-boggling to me. I was like,
Mhm.
what? Like, it's like that meme where like the girl's like doing math and like squinting and like staring off into the distance. Like, that's what happened in my brain. It like broke. I was like, you can't go to ice cream without knowing if you want to marry someone.
Yeah.
Yep.
So intense.
hmm Which is also goes back to like this like very marriage centric
Yes.
construct in
Yes.
the Christian church. This idea that like all roads lead to marriage, which I think is already like a poor construct to work off of. Like that it forces people to feel so much pressure around dating, around how it's going to impact a future marriage. And it doesn't even allow people to consider even the question of, do I want marriage? Like, that's not even considered.
That's not even a question.
No.
You want marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone wants marriage.
It's like in that pool of things, like you must want marriage, you must want kids, you must be heterosexual, like you must follow all along with all of these things, full stop. Why wouldn't you? This
Yeah.
is the way. Like this is how God intended for it to be for some reason, even
Thus.
though the Bible does not indicate that. But if we were following the Bible's construct of marriage, we would all have multiple partners.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Which honestly
Well, men would
sounds
have multiple
exhausting.
partners.
Yes, and women would be property and sex slaves.
Yes.
So
Yeah. We're going off of what the Bible says. Yeah.
yes. Which brings us back to biblical inerrancy.
Exactly.
Literally, like the idea, it's this really flawed idea that Christians so often follow of like, the Bible is absolute truth, full stop. And it's like, if you really believed that, you would do all these things. Even if you cast the Old Testament out, if you say every single thing Jesus said is something we should do, all of you wouldn't have hands because you would have cut off your hand for making you lust.
Cut out your eyeballs.
You would have cut out your
soon.
eyeballs. You would never, ever feel any disdain towards an enemy. You would always turn your other cheek when someone hits you and let them hit you again.
Mm-hmm.
You would always give away all of your wealth. You would not, like, you don't believe this. They don't actually believe in biblical inerrancy.
No.
Because it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous concept.
Yep.
Anyways, sorry, that brings us all the way back to the beginning.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like you believe in biblical inerrancy to the standards that you have determined
yes,
it to
as
be.
much as it benefits them.
Yes.
And that's fine. Just admit it.
Yeah.
Like, don't pretend
Yeah.
that you believe every single thing that's in the Bible. You have determined what parts of the Bible benefit you the most and feed into your worldview and
Yeah.
your power structures that you're comfortable
Yep.
with. And that is fine. Just
Well,
understand
it's not
it.
fine
Yes,
because
it's not fine. The thing is we all do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, everyone who's reading the Bible is putting it into their worldview and manipulating it. And I feel like manipulating is like a dirty word, but I mean in the sense of you are looking at it and thinking of it through your lens.
Right.
That is just
That
the way
just
people are.
will happen.
That is how it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just admit it.
Yeah. And it starts to get real fishy when you notice, the way that we interpret this in the sort of like stereotypical evangelical framework, it seems to really benefit a certain small group of people in
Yeah.
very specific ways.
Yes.
And seems to oppress and not benefit everyone else.
Yeah.
Weird.
Was that God's design?
Let's think about that.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because if instead you exchange biblical inerrancy for just like following basic biblical principles, you get a very different faith.
that is true.
Very, very different.
Oh, she said it.
So,
Dang.
She
Anyways.
said it.
Emma's on fire.
I got riled
That's
up.
really good.
Yeah, preach.
I'm like, can we just like play that to all of like our old pastors? That'd be great, actually. I'm like, hey, long time no talk. Here, listen to this.
I'm like, the number of just like randos with a bachelor's degree from a stupid college that has one worldview that are just running operations
That are qualified experts in all areas
in
of
all
life.
areas of life. Just go sit down.
Sit down.
Seriously.
Take a chill.
I mean, and we're lucky if they even do have that. Most of them
Yeah.
have no bachelor's degree
That's true.
or any sort of qualifications except for the fact that they're a white man.
Yeah. And they just really love Jesus.
And another white man happened to notice their potential.
Oh, well, ladies, holy shit. The amount of things that were like such a big deal.
Yeah.
Like it's so sad. Like I say we still, like I participate in church.
I know. You keep calling it your church, too.
I know.
And I'm like, you don't go there.
I know. And it's, I don't know. But like the amount of pressure that is put on congregations and young people, it's really heartbreaking. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Jesus did not mean to, his intention was not to put you through utter turmoil to determine if you are a good person or not. So maybe take a few deep breaths, have, a sip of some tea or some alcohol, which is not something we got into today, but wow, that was a whole thing. And just remember, like, the purpose of faith, that he came to set you free. So why are you binding yourself?
I think I just dream of a day when the predominant faith practice in America, regardless of the religion it's associated with, is of an invitational nature and not a domination and control nature,
Yeah.
where people are invited to partake in spiritual things and practice spiritual practices, but it is no longer an indoctrination or a cult or some sort of like lifetime commitment to a specific way of thinking.
Yeah.
Because we change.
That's so real. And it's not about how or when you get baptized or if you wear a t-shirt over your swimsuit or even how many people you've slept with and that you're not objectified in stupid analogies that are flawed.
Yeah. And I think like if I would look at faith objectively, like none of those things define this loving God that we've been like purported to believe in, right? There's like your behavior actually has very little to do with this grace of God that is described in the Bible.
Yeah.
And in fact, whatever you do actually is described as nothing. It's sort of described as like worthless.
Yeah.
It actually is, if you're really practicing the faith by the grace of God, that you are receiving whatever you're receiving from the benefits of faith. So I think having a more humble approach to the lack of control that you have in what like this freedom that's offered especially within Christianity is a good thing to meditate on and focus on.
Yeah, for sure.
Because otherwise we get very, very controlling and just straight up rude and oppressive. And those have been very harmful to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
that's just my take.
Yeah, we've talked about it all, guys. We've talked about purity culture. We've talked about baptisms. We've talked about some church camp. We've talked about, for some reason, like young girls are so threatening to older men. And I mean, the list goes on. I hope that this was an enjoyable conversation for you, and also that you were able to maybe identify some things that you didn't recognize were problematic, either in your current faith practice or in your past faith practice, because I feel like it is a ongoing unwinding, at least for me. So with all that, I guess we're going to land this plane for today and say...
First episode, season 4.
First episode, season 4. And Kelly's just going to get bigger and bigger until baby comes out one day. And me and Emma are going to help her with whatever she needs.
Exactly.
But
Emma can drill holes in my ceiling now.
There you go.
Exactly.
That is...
she's got you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Just call her DIY Emma.
Okay.
Well, woman beings, it is a delight and an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be back with you today. And we look forward to seeing you again in a month and talking. And in the meantime, make sure that you are following us on TikTok and Threads and Instagram and YouTube and giving us a review, because we've been doing this for 4 years now. And if you haven't given us a review by now, come on.
Come on. You know you wanna.
We're fun.
Just give
We've
us a
earned
review.
it. We've earned your review, I think.
We would love it. And if you, obviously, you'll miss us in the 3 weeks between each episode. So reach out to us on Instagram. We always love to have the conversation.
And we'll still be posting on there.
Yeah, we'll still be active.
We'll be around.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, though, we hope you have a good one, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.